all have been taught or told to behave and act a certain way to fit into little boxes within society. We kind of still do this as adults. Think about the last time you were annoyed or upset by someone. That emotion can turn into a projection, and suddenly you start telling yourself a story in your head about this individual, and it may not even be true. It's just a projection of your. We have the ability to disagree and remind ourselves that whatever they are saying is more of a reflection of them and their personal dilemmas. Hey, are you someone searching for wisdom, or are you someone who is seeking answers to how to understand yourself and ready to live your truth? If so, you've probably come across the cult classic of The Four Agreements. It's one of those books that every self-help aisle has in it, and it's simple, it's spiritual, and powerful. But also, let's be real, maybe a little too simplified at times. Today, we're going to dive into the ancient Toltec wisdom behind the book, The Four Agreements. And yes, I've got a few questions and critiques too, because growth isn't just about agreeing with everything. It's about thinking for yourself. And that's what we're going to be doing today when we dive into this book. Welcome back to Hey Titi. I'm your host, Titi Jessie. This is the space where we grow together, learn from each other, and take a little time to reflect on life, love, and everything in between. If that sounds like your vibe, take a moment to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share with a friend. Now, let's get into today's video. Today, we're going to be diving into the book, The Four Agreements. And if you are a listener to this podcast or have seen a previous episode, you know that I have some requirements while I'm walking down the aisles at Barnes & Nobles. Firstly, I want to have a book that quickly grabs my attention. I want it to be a quick read and an easy, digestible read. And perhaps you're thinking, oh, well, you might be critiquing the way in which I look for books or look for knowledge. However, sometimes when you are in the need to be able to read a book, especially me, I need to be able to pick up a book, read it, and have the time to be able to actually read it and digest it. And so when I saw this book, I thought to myself, all right, The Four Agreements, I've actually heard about this. People have recommended this book to me. So I went, and when I found it, I flipped through the first few pages because I like to have that physical contact with the book. And I thought, you know what, this seems pretty easy enough to read and digest. So I thought, I'm going to give it a try. I mean, right there on the book, it says a book of wisdom, and I'm always in search for a good, quick read with a little bit of knowledge and something that I can take back and reflect on. So, and that's exactly what I got from this book. I read it so you didn't have to, but I'm going to take that statement back because I would strongly encourage that you go and pick up this book and read it, because you can probably read it in a few hours if you're a quick reader. I'm not a quick reader. It did take me a little bit of time to read it because I like to also take notes and reflect on it. So I would suggest picking up this book. It definitely provides some quick advice, some reflective pieces so that you can take it back and really readjust and look at your life from a new lens. And so the Four Agreements, the author, Don Miguel Ruiz, he actually begins this book with an introduction of the Toltec, which is an ancient Mexican spiritual tradition known for wisdom and deep understanding of human consciousness. So the Toltecs believe that every human is living a dream, an illusion, created by agreements constructed long before we were ever conceived, and agreements shaping our beliefs and behaviors from childhood. So what that basically means is that the Toltecs thought that we live in a dream state in which we all have been created. We all, since conception, have been fed what our reality is, and not so much what the physical reality is, but what we understand reality as being. So, for instance, the way in which we subscribe to certain religions, or the way in which we may view our relationships with individuals, our rights and wrongs, our do's and don'ts, things that we as a society have created to be our truths are considered our agreements. And when I began to read this story, I very much thought, okay, so it's the beliefs that individuals have instilled in me in which have shaped my reality. So the things that I was told that was good versus bad, things that were made for me to believe were acceptable within society. And so I had to really take a second and think about, okay, well then, what have I been told that I believe in and I subscribe to that is one of my truths, in order for me to begin to understand what an agreement is. And so after laying out the landscape that we as individuals live within a dreamlike state, it's a state in which we are kind of just going, flying, living through life, believing and subscribing to the beliefs that others have provided us to tell us that we have internalized and beliefs. For instance, a belief that I have is that a certain body type. So the way I'm supposed to be built, the way I'm constructed, what is acceptable and not acceptable, and and luckily, with the change of the way in which society has really altered the image of beauty, we can all subscribe to different ideals of beauty. But my ideal of beauty was always subscribed to me as like curvy and very not too overweight, or my hair has to be a certain length in order to be perceived as quote unquote what is beautiful. So my agreement of what is beautiful is defined in a certain way, because that's how it was shaped for me through media, through family, through friends and family. So that those are things that shape the way in which I think or thought was acceptable for me. Right. And if I didn't meet this agreement, I was in contradiction with this agreement, and it caused me a lot of heartache and turmoil, because I then wanted to alter myself to fit the agreement of what is acceptable within society. So that's just one way in which I started to think about the way in which the agreements shape my beliefs and my behaviors as even a child. And so by understanding that these agreements are things that were told to us, that's kind of like what I believe is really the first step in understanding and being able to shift those agreements, is that we all have been taught or told to behave and act a certain way to fit into little boxes within society, so that we'll believed as will be acceptable. So those are, and it's kind of normalized, right? And when someone goes against the grain of what we think is right or wrong, and I understand there's definitely a clear wrong. There are clear wrongs. I'm not saying that all wrongs should be questioned, things that are outside of the spectrum of right and wrong, that they shouldn't be questioned. They should be. But I'm talking about your own ideals, on your sense of self, just to get that out of the way. So by understanding that we have agreements that we may not necessarily subscribe to, we have begun sort of like shifting our own sense of self. That's kind of like the first step. That's putting your toe in the water to alter or to come out of the dream. You need to realize that, number one, you're in a dream, and that what you've been told to is the truth about yourself is not true. And then the next thing to realize is that you can change these agreements. And so it kind of reminded me of The Matrix. Maybe this is a little 90s baby of me, but if you have never seen The Matrix, that is a cult classic. Definitely a red pill, blue pill situation in which Neo is the main protagonist, is in a dreamlike state, and he somehow, I actually don't even remember how it happened, but he comes across someone and he is given the opportunity to come out of his dreamlike state by taking a pill. He's given the choice, and we too are given the choice to decide between what others have created our reality to be or what the truth in reality. So you have the blue pill, stay the same, or the red pill, you can now reemerge and actually live within your own truths or the true reality. If you haven't watched The Matrix, now I have to rewatch it because as I was reading this book, that's exactly what I was thinking about was The Matrix. We have the choice to choose between fiction and reality, and we are the ones who construct that reality. So he begins the book by telling us that we have the right to transform, and to do that we need to follow these 4 agreements, or to subscribe to newer agreements. And the 4 agreements are: number 1, be impeccable with your words. And so, from what I summarized, Miguel relates this to the biblical language, where in the beginning there was word, and with that, in the beginning there was God, and the word is God. So our words are like God, and we can manifest them into an antidote or into poison. And so, quoting directly from the book, Miguel says, being impeccable with your word is the correct use of your energy. It means to use your energy in the direction of truth and love for yourself. If you make an agreement with yourself to be impeccable with your word, just with the intention, the truth will manifest through you and clean all the emotional poison that exists within inside of you. Now, when he says an agreement, he's talking about the beliefs we've accepted as true about ourselves and the world. Remember, these are things that we were told. So when we then also say things in a negative way, that is a truth that we are agreeing to. So we can either agree to utilize poison, use our words as poison, or use them as towards truth and love. So, and the truth is, when we use our words to spread negativity, we're not just hurting other people, we're hurting ourselves too. We're reinforcing the very beliefs that cause our own pain. So this takes me back to a lesson I learned, or you may have also heard or learned when you were a kid, is if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I remember clearly in the 1st grade when I learned this lesson, because it was told to me by a teacher. And I remember clearly feeling so upset that I was caught doing this to someone else. And I said some really mean things to a girl in my class, mostly because other people liked her more, or I felt like they liked her more, and I wanted them to like me. And looking back, I realized that I wasn't being truthful or loving. I was insecure, and I was projecting my own insecurities onto her by saying negative and nasty things, and my words were a reflection of those insecurities. And honestly, we kind of still do this as adults. Think about the last time you were annoyed or upset by someone. That emotion can turn into a projection, and suddenly you start telling yourself a story in your head about this individual, and it may not even be true. It's just a projection of your own insecurities. So they probably don't like you either. That's what you're telling yourself. But in reality, that may not be what's happening. It's your own insecurities presenting themselves in your thought process and in the way in which you speak about others. So we start building stories in our head using our words, and they aren't based in truth or love. And so when we alter our mindset and we utilize our words to speak truth and love, we can then do exactly what Miguel is telling us to do here. And Miguel means when he and do what he says when he says we need to be impeccable with our words. It's not just about what we say out loud, it's also about the words we tell ourselves. So are we speaking truth and love into our lives, or are we letting emotional poison shape our reality? So really shifting our mindset and beginning to utilize positive language and positive thought and speak truth and love. So that's really the first agreement. And really the hard part here is thinking about and shifting those ideas that we think, because we do it all the time. And just to give you an example, like a train of thought that you might have, or you might have even said, is like, they're being so fake, right? But it might just be a projection of yourself, like might come from not feeling comfortable or being authentic when someone isn't able to show up as themselves. So are you showing up as yourself? They're so full of themselves. Comes from envy or lack of self-worth. Sometimes you might call others extra or too much when deep down they wish, or you wish, that you could have that kind of freedom. I've done that. I'm guilty of that, especially when I'm on social media. And think about that. Actually, we're all so programmed to go through social media, and how often do you like see something and you take it for face value and you think of something negative instead of positive? And I know it's natural for us to do that because in a way we're protecting ourselves, but by telling us these false truths about others, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. But is it really making you feel better about yourself, or is it reinforcing those negative ideals that you have about yourself? So that's really the first agreement. Now, the remaining 3 agreements are building off the first agreement, and he states that within this book. So making the first the foundation for the remaining agreements. And due to them being built off of the first agreement, I'm going to save my critique of the 3 after I review them. So the next agreement is, don't take anything personally. I need a mirror in my face when I say that. Don't take anything personally. My first reaction when reading this line, I was like, okay, but is it deeper than that? Taking it again back to the beginning of the book, Miguel reminds us that everyone is in their own dream. We are all living in our own worlds with our own perceptions and beliefs, or to use his words, our own agreements. So when knowing that and understanding that it provides us some agency to know that we can only control our own lives and our own perceptions, we cannot change others and their ideals. So we can control how we alter our agreements with ourselves, or how we look and think and react to society and things around us. But we have to realize within this moment that we can't change what anyone else looks and acts and how they behave, only how we react to it. So even if their ideals and perceptions can appear as attempting to cause us harm, we have the ability to disagree and remind ourselves that whatever they are saying is more of a reflection of them and their personal dilemmas. What they think and do is a reflection on them. That's kind of hard, because thinking back to the first agreement, it was kind of hard to think about some of the negative things that we think and say, because it's hard to hold up that mirror and look at yourself and think about how are your words or your negative reflections on others really a projection of your own ideals. And that's hard to look in the mirror, right? I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Oh, asking him to make a change. I'm sorry, I'm not a singer. That was my attempt to sound like Michael Jackson, but it really is looking at yourself in the mirror. And again, if it does ultimately affect you, then it may be time to do some self-reflection. What intentional dialogue are you allowing to affect you? Whether it be positive or negative, you have the ability to choose how they will affect you. And that part right there, choice, I'm going to talk more about that towards the end, because choice, I'll get to that. The next agreement is don't make assumptions. I've heard in the past people say, what happens when people assume, they make out of you and me, right? They make a donkey out of you and me. And this spirals back again to the first and second agreement. We cannot assume what others are thinking, how they're feeling, what are they saying about us, unless we've heard it. But sometimes even when you hear something, you kind of have to contextualize it, maybe even confront the individual. What were they actually meaning? Because we can twist people's words in our own heads and think something differently than what they were saying. Those assumptions are our perceptions. So when in our mind we may be assuming they have it all together, just because someone looks polished or successful doesn't mean they aren't struggling behind the scenes, right? We don't know what people are going through when they're at home, or what their lives are like, or what's going on in their brain, how much they may be beating themselves up, or what sort of mental illnesses they may be struggling with. Something else you might be telling yourself, they don't like me. Silence or distance is often mistaken for dislike when it could be anxiety, distraction, or their own stuff. They're just lucky. Many people assume success came easy, ignoring the unseen effort, sacrifice, or struggle behind the scenes. They're being rude or disrespectful. What we see as attitude could actually be stress, social anxiety, or someone setting boundaries, and they're showing off. Confidence or pride in one's work can easily be misread as arrogance by someone who's feeling insecure. Again, the way that even you are reflecting on something can be your own self-reflection and your own projection. But the way that they may be interpreting you or even saying it out loud is really a reflection on them. So we can choose when we listen. We can choose what we're thinking, and we can stop with the assumptions, because again, we don't know what's really going on in behind the scenes. And we often think this way to protect ourselves, to reject others before they have the chance to reject us. Our natural survival instincts kick in, but that constant need to survive causes suffering, and we learn in don't believe everything you think. We know our minds can cause us to think things that cannot be further from the truth or from reality. To be free of suffering, kind of piggybacking off of the last book, we need to live within reality or truth, not an assumption of the truth. That's living in the dreamlike state. Are you basing what you're thinking off of truth? Or are you basing what you're thinking off of your assumption of what someone else is saying or doing or behaving towards you? All right, and the last agreement, always do your best. I feel like if you are a child of an immigrant, such as myself, perhaps of someone who came from humble beginnings or from a household where there was a lot of struggle financially, they may have stated to you, always do your best, right? Because the best will make you successful. That may be an assumption of mine. However, this is my truth. I was always told, if you're going to be something, always attempt to do your best. Put your best foot. Do your best effort. And by making this agreement with yourself, your effort can change your everyday. But at the end of the day, if you know you gave it your best, your effort changes every day, right? Just based off of your energy. Did you sleep well? Did you eat right? Did you have all your vitamins? Kind of shows my age a little bit, but But at the end of the day, if you know you gave it your best effort and you are content with that level of effort, then you can have a clear mind knowing as much. So by taking action and doing whatever it may be, then you are choosing to place into motion your wants and your desires. Here I would argue that there is a subsection to this, in that not only are you always doing your best, but always do your best, which also includes putting your best into action. So not just like wanting to do your best or perceiving as if you're applying your best, but actually putting into action your best. How many times did I just say best? Let's tally that. It is not only about applying your best effort, but putting your best effort through actions towards something that holds true to your own agreements you have made with yourself. Manifestation isn't just about writing it down or saying it or thinking it. It's about choosing to live by a new set of agreements. Agreements that reflect who you really are, not who the world told you to be. And to be able to alter those agreements and to create a new sense of self and being within the world, or to really become someone that lives towards your own values, your own truths, then beginning with these 4 agreements, it'll definitely lead you down that path. And so just to give some examples of like what an old agreement would be versus a new agreement, an old agreement would kind of be like, oh my God, I'm always going to struggle with money. I always have problems with money. Rather than thinking of it as that being your struggle, perhaps you do have some trouble with money, but you can alter that and say like money, and putting it with sort of like an affirmation, but taking that affirmation, that manifestation, and putting it into action. Because the only person who is in control of your world and the things around you is you. So rather than saying you struggle with money, money flows to me easily and I know how to handle it, but putting it into action would be stating, start tracking your money, even if it's uncomfortable, because it is. I know it is, especially seeing how much you may spend on your daily coffee runs. Learn how to manage it instead of avoiding it. That's kind of the first step is to managing your money, is to seeing how you spend your money. And another example of an old agreement you may have with yourself: love always ends in pain. I had that agreement with myself when I was a kid, seeing my family and the way in which many marriages did not continue to flourish or last but beyond a certain amount of time, or the way in which, I wasn't raised in a 2-parent household. I had a single parent. Just seeing, broken homes. Not many people were in long committed relationships, and those that did ended abruptly and sometimes chaotically. I always saw that love end in pain. And so a new agreement that I've sort of over time and over all my own experiences had to tell myself is that and again, I may have manifested this in the long run, but I never said it to myself. Perhaps this is something that you are dealing with. You can say to yourself, I attract love that's safe, kind, and reciprocal. And by putting that into action, you can stop entertaining relationships that confuse or drain you. Start naming your needs out loud. So if you are in a committed relationship and you do love this person, and it is safe and it is kind, but you need it to be more reciprocal, perhaps you need to start vocalizing it, and then you can interchange those things. But just vocalizing it more, put it into action. Perhaps that relationship isn't for you and you need a new relationship. I'm not saying get out of your relationship. I'm just saying there are ways in which you can start naming out loud and putting things into action that you want and need from your relationship. An old agreement you may have is, I have to play small to be safe. And the new agreement can be, I deserve to be seen, heard, and paid for by gifts and paid for my gifts. So if you're at work and you don't feel valued, or you don't see that you are cherished within your role, you can always make that choice to then, you know what? I'm worth more than this. I need more than this. You go and you can seek it, put it into action. Start applying for jobs or pitching your work boldly to your superiors. Ask for more because you're worth more. And an old agreement also might be, I'm too much. So should I tone myself down? And your new agreement should be, my full self is worthy and welcome. And I should say this to myself. Where's my mirror at? Because I need one. I should put a mirror here. Just looking at myself in the mirror. Post the video. Wear the outfit. Say what you mean. Take up space like you belong. And you're not taking up space in a negative way. You're taking up space because you belong. Because you do. Every time you choose a new thought and back it with a new action, you're breaking an old agreement. You're telling the old story. Thank you for your service, but I'm done now. I need more for myself. I want more for myself in my life. I expect more. And it's okay to expect more and want to change and want to grow and alter yourself. And remember, who cares what anyone else thinks? Because you don't know actually and truly what they're thinking. Because we can only know what we're thinking and how we perceive ourselves and others. And we need to choose to, one, say it and think it in a positive way. Because our words have power. And we also need to remember that we can't take anything personally. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, what others are thinking that could be projections of themselves onto us. And that's really their own things to deal with. Don't make assumptions, because we can only assume what we can't assume. Don't assume. You only know what you're thinking and feeling, and always try and do your best. Apply your best effort. I know effort alters and changes, but try to do your best with that effort that you have at the moment. Now, of course, I did say I had a critique, and I do. And I do believe the Four Agreements is one of those books that gets passed around because it's simple, straightforward information, and it's for good reason. It's digestible, it's direct, and it can be spiritual. It has a lot of spiritual direct quotes in there, and it talks about spirits and energies. But here's where I think we need to hold some space for some critique, and it's okay to critique because these are my beliefs. Ruiz encourages us not to take anything personally, and in theory that's freeing, but in practice that's difficult. That can feel dismissive if you're navigating microaggressions, abuse, or generational trauma. Like, yes, technically what others do isn't about us, but let's be real, sometimes it's done to us. And just not taking it personally doesn't address the harm or offer repair. So we do have to be, take this and realize that you can apply it to certain areas in your life, but be mindful as to how it still may impact you. And the idea of being impeccable with your words is beautiful. But what about folks who are still finding their voice, like people pleasers, trauma survivors, or folks raised in environments where speaking up was punished? We can't hold people to the same agreements when we don't all start from the same place. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this book, it's a tool, but it's not gospel. It's a piece of the puzzle. but not the whole picture. And as we grow, it's okay to question even the things that helped us heal. It could be a stepping stone for us to begin to heal, because it provides us the space, and it provides us with the ability to begin to try and heal and develop our own truths and our own, like using Don Miguel Ruiz's words, on our own agreements. So a little bit of advice from this episode, in taking what don't, after that critique, I know it's probably hard to give advice, but you know, we still have some control over the things that we think, and have been told to us. And really thinking about that, oftentimes you can just do some self-reflection and think about what has been stopping you or holding you back from something that you want to achieve or accomplish, or a thought or ideal that you have on yourself that has caused you harm. And just really think about it, become aware of it, and then reflect on it, rewrite it, align it with action, and it's going to make a new agreement. So again, like a new equation, sort of, let's make it mathematical, is first become aware of the thing that is harming you or making you feel a certain way or has caused you harm. Reflect on it, rewrite it, align it with action, and it will create a new agreement for you. So awareness is, what belief or agreement are you holding on to that you no longer serves you? This could be inherited belief, trauma pattern, or unconscious thought like, I'll always be broke. Love means struggle, right? Sort of the ones that we talked about earlier in the episode. And I want you to reflect on that ideal. Where did it come from? Is it even mine? Ask yourself, who taught me this? Who benefits from me believing this? Oftentimes it's no one benefits. This is also where you can critique spiritual tools or teachings that felt one size fits all, right? Those one size fits all things can be rewritten. When you're rewriting them, what do I want to believe instead? Write a new agreement or a manifestation that aligns with who you're becoming. I attract ease and financial flow. I am worthy of love without pain. Aligned action. What's one thing I can do that backs this new agreement up? This is where it gets real. Even the smallest action locks in, like track your money, say no to that confusing text, apply for that job, right? And the biggest bonus I can say at the end of this, right? Because through these actions, through this equation, it will help you establish new agreements. It's provide yourself with grace, because this equation doesn't need to be perfect. It just has to be intentional. And healing is messy, it's non-linear, and it's full of growth curves. So add grace to it as well. Keep going even when you fail into old habits, because let's be real, we're human beings, and sometimes, most of the time, it's hard to break a habit. But you can teach yourself a new one. So, with that, thank you for listening to today's podcast. I hope you found the discussion and the advice helpful in your journey towards personal growth and development. Remember to apply what you've learned in your daily life and continue to strive towards becoming the best version of yourself. Don't forget to subscribe, share the podcast with someone you know, and leave a review if you enjoyed the show or if you have an idea for a future podcast. I look forward to sharing more insights with you in the future. Nos vemos, familia. I look forward to sharing more insights with you in the future. And in the next podcast, we're actually going to be diving into, and I make that little cringy face if you're watching this, the let them theory. Because as you can see, it already broke one of my agreements that I can only read a small text. A thin book. This is a thickums, but it's got some great material in it. We'll be discussing the let them theory. in the next episode. Nos vemos, familia. Adios.